Some say a few are chosen and the rest are dregs. But I say we humans have our humanity. We will defy this world with a power from beyond. Now, you who has set foot in this world, your journey has reached its end, but one final doorway remains. Step forth if you have understood the meaning of your journey. Defeat me, command me to step aside. Show me that you are worthier than I to rescue her. Then, the threads of all fate will be yours to reweave. My memory has all but faded completely, but I will always remember how much she too loved these flowers.
Who is Dainsleif? Well, chances are you've heard his voice prior, as it is present not only in the Teyvat trailer, but many of the character introduction videos from the official Genshin Impact channel. From this, I would say it is right to assume that this character will be extremely significant to the plot one day, but as of right now, what we know of him is very limited. He comes from Khaenri'ah, a hidden corner where the god's gaze does not fall, where those who exist there dream of dreaming, outside the perpetual meantime of a sheltered eternity. His words, not mine. I'm not that poetic. Khaenri'ah is not under the watch of the Seven. Centuries prior, the fall of the Black Sun dynasty threw the kingdom into chaos, its people said to have been cursed and transformed into monsters. It's theorized that these monsters are what we know as the Abyss Order. The name Dainsleif or Dainsleif was the name of a legendary sword crafted by Dain, a dwarf in Norse mythology, also known as Dain's Legacy. The sword was imbued with magic that dictates it must take a life before it once again can be bestowed. In other references, Dain is referred to as Dvalin, and I'm sure you may have come across this name in Mondstadt already. Yes, this is the true name of Storm Terror, the dragon imbued with animo. I'm not sure if any of this has significance, but I feel it is interesting to point it out. Could Dainsleif have some ties to Storm Terror? Or could they just like the sound of the names? There are some commonalities between the two, however. People of Khaenri'ah seem to have a feeling of neglect, as if the rest of Teyvat have forgotten about them. This feeling is very similar to that of what Dvalin felt when he awoke from his cursed slumber. Upon awakening, he felt that Mondstadt had forgotten about him, and this left him open to the corruption of the Abyss Order. Maybe the story of Dvalin is just a metaphor for the relationship between Teyvat and Khaenri'ah, but this is just conjecture, so take that as you will. It may be nothing. So let's move on to some other details. He has one eye that appears to be covered up, while the other is left exposed. Within his exposed pupil is a familiar symbol that I believe has great significance. To my knowledge, there is only one other person that shares this unique feature. Furthermore, there is something else that binds these two characters, and that is they both hail from Khaenri'ah. Do you know who that individual is? This is your chance. You are our last hope. Kai's father squeezed his son's lean shoulders as he spoke, seemingly looking right through Kaya to some place far beyond. On the other side of the horizon sat their distant homeland of Khaenri'ah. Kaya would never forget the look of both hope and hatred in his father's eyes as he uttered those words. There is part of Kaya that is hidden from the world. He's an agent of Khaenri'ah, placed in Mondstadt to serve their interests. Abandoned by his father near Dawn Winery, he found he was welcomed by Mondstadt with open arms. Kaya does not have a favourable view of his homeland, however. He has this to say about it.
Khaenri'ah? ほう、いろいろ知ってるな。カーンルイヤの栄光はとっくに消えてるよ。今残っている者は全員罪人だ。あいつらのことを気にする必要なんてないだろ。
And on the subject of his covered up eye, he just attempts to pass it off as if it's nothing.
俺の目？俺の目なら問題ない。 体の一部を覆い隠すのは普通だろ？服やズボンだって同じことじゃないか。
What does Kaya have to hide? Unfortunately, we do not know. We can only speculate. However, the symbol within his revealed eye is a significant one, and I'll go into that more later. For now, I want to explore another question I have with regards to Dainsleif. So the trailer is the scenario where Aoife is picked as our protagonist, so going forward, this is how we will proceed. The assumption is that she, who needs rescuing, is Lumin, right? This is suggested by how she is present at the start of the trailer, and then missing by the end. However,
My memory has all but faded completely. But I will always remember how much she too loved these flowers.
well, this just strengthens the case. Look, Lumin's got those flowers in her hair. But for this to be true, we have to pass off a few details. First of all, we know Lumin isn't in a state of needing to be rescued. She seems to be going about freely, leading the Abyss Order. We could argue that she is under the control of something, and that is what she needs rescuing from. Second of all, in the scenario where Lumin is the main character, these statements no longer make any sense. Aoife has nothing to suggest that he loves these particular flowers, so why even mention them at all? Thirdly, somehow, Lumin has to have a long history with Dainsleif for this to hold water. The line, "My memory has all but faded completely," suggests a great amount of time has passed since the time he spent with her. This is possible, but for me to explain this, we may have to go off on a bit of a tangent. So off on that tangent we go. One common theory is the idea that Lumin and Aoife have been sent into different times, and the unknown god is the god of time. It is an interesting theory, and I'll put a link in the description, so you can go and watch it if you haven't already, but I will attempt to summarise here. The premise is the unknown god sends Lumin to the time of the Cataclysm, which we assume is 500 years before Aoife in the present. This allows Lumin to have an established history in Teyvat, allowing time for her to encounter Dainsleif. However, I do not subscribe to this theory, and I will explain why. When the god encounters the siblings, she consumes them into a cube, and she can be seen holding one while our chosen protagonist also gets consumed. This suggests imprisonment to me, not sending to a different time. To further back up this claim is what is written in the character story for the Traveller. A boy and a girl stood amidst the turmoil, under an unfamiliar sky. You were a pair of travelling twins, passing through countless worlds during your journey. Descending upon a continent named Teyvat, you hoped that you would be able to enjoy your time here. But as you awoke among the falling stars, you saw the world in turmoil, a cataclysm raging across the land. There are two possibilities in the timeline that this could be. Either the Archon War, which is 2000 years prior to the events of the game, or the Cataclysm, which is 500 years prior. Due to the language and the specific use of the word cataclysm, I think it is right to assume that it was 500 years ago when the siblings entered Teyvat. You sought to leave this place and move on to the next world, but an unknown god stood before you, barring the way. This deity was spotless, floating over a world of chaos, looking down on you. The god took your only kin away, and you were sealed and cast into a deep slumber filled with nightmares. When you reawakened, the world was changed. The flames of war raged no longer, and nothing was left that looked familiar. The line that interests me in particular is a deep slumber filled with nightmares. In the trailer, we will be reunited. Lumin witnesses destruction of what many believe to be Mondstadt and the cataclysm that happened 500 years ago. However, I'm not entirely convinced that this is the case. It could just be an artistic interpretation in the trailer, but the possibility is Lumin is not witnessing the cataclysm, but instead witnessing events to come as they seem to be unrealistic, like a vision or nightmare. It is stated that the one responsible for the cataclysm was an alchemist known as Gold, who came from a faraway land, Khaenri'ah. He used his talents to create an army of shadowy monsters, and it is believed that his power originates from the abyss. You may have heard of a dragon known as Durin recently, in the Dragonspine arc. This dragon attacked Mondstadt during the time of the cataclysm. Barbatos intervened and summoned forth Dvalin, who emerged victorious, but unfortunately fell into a great slumber due to the poison blood clots and wounds caused by the battle, only to reawaken 500 years later, in the present. This was the nature of Mondstadt's version of the cataclysm, and I don't feel the imagery that Lumen sees reflects these events. So what were these events that Lumen saw? Could they be these nightmares? Could it be a prophecy, visions of things to come? Whatever she is exposed to in these nightmares is what set her on the path to engulf the 7 thrones in the abyss. The tangent only serves to speculate on the identity of her being Lumen and the possibility that Lumen has history with Dainsleif. I do believe it is still possible. Lumen may have awoke from her slumber long before Aether, and I believe this is implied. But what if Lumen is a red herring? There is very specific phrasing in Dainsleif's wording. She too loves these flowers. Emphasis on too. This could suggest a number of things, that Dainsleif loves these flowers as well. On the other hand, he appears to be speaking directly to Aether, so the she too could be translated to, she, just like your sister, loves these flowers. I will draw attention to the problem with looking into the wording of English translations, so if anybody is able to interpret the Chinese for these lines, maybe the implication that she is somebody besides Lumen is dead in the water. But for the sake of fun, let's entertain the idea that she is not Lumen, but somebody else. Flowers are used a lot in MiHoYo games, and they often symbolise something. In the Seelie animation, for example, flowers are present when she's trying to break out. These flowers appear to resemble lilies, and the meaning associated with them is often cited as purity or rebirth. In the case of this animation, Seelie is giving in to her other self, thus shattering her purity. These flowers are actually quite similar to the ones in question, however, they lack the blue petal. But could these at least be a species of lily? I actually wasted a lot of time trying to work out if these flowers exist in game, and it doesn't seem they do, besides on Lumen's head of course. This draws me to the conclusion that this flower is not native to any of the existing areas in the game. So where are the flowers from? If I were to hazard a guess, I would say they're from the world that Teyvat resides within. Otherwise, Dainsleif wouldn't be familiar with them. Did Lumen pick them upon arriving in the world? I guess you could say we've hit a dead end. We cannot suggest they're from Khaenri'ah, as it is stated the siblings came to Teyvat, and Khaenri'ah is not considered part of Teyvat. What bothers me is Dainsleif appears to have history with these flowers. There is the possibility they are native to multiple locations, and they are a special flower that only grows in very specific conditions. So considering the predicament we find ourselves in, let's entertain the idea that these flowers grow in Khaenri'ah and she comes from Khaenri'ah, just like Dainsleif, as I believe this is still plausible. I mentioned at the start the symbol within their eyes. We've seen this symbol before in a couple of places. First of all, Paimon has this symbol in her hair clip. I wrote an entire section on her, however, I had to cut it. It's not relevant to the point and warrants its own video, so I'll just conclude that, nope, I don't think Paimon is our mystery girl, so let's move on. Albedo has this shape on his neck, but Albedo is not a girl. Moving on. I will just put my bias forward now. I have high hopes that this character I'm about to explore is the girl Dainsleif speaks of. I've posed this question to a few others who theorise around the game. When it comes to Honkai depictions in Genshin, do they only take the appearance, or are they adopting themes from these characters? In my previous video I spoke briefly about how Mei attempts to hold onto her friendship and how this could align with the themes around the God of Eternity, let me show you an example of overlapping themes between the Sustainer and the Herrscher of the Void.
But when you wanted to leave and go on to the next world, your path was blocked by some unknown god?
Outlanders, your journey ends here. Who are you? The sustainer of heavenly principles. The arrogation of mankind ends now.
人類、存在そのものが間違っている。戦争、欺き、嫉妬、貪欲。人類のせいで私は全てを失った。でも今日私は全てを飲み込む。私が崩壊なのだ。
A theme between these two characters is the idea that mankind must be suppressed and kept in check. Granted, Honkai's version is far more extreme as it is about explicit destruction of it, but the similarities do exist. Do you want to get this body back and save the girl? You are, right? Is she a loved friend and a member of your little family? Did you build sweet little memories together? Made any lasting promises? If that's the case, then I shall kill her precious family with her hands and body. Those of you who loved her and are trying to save her, you shall drink from the chalice of pain, sorrow and despair, and endure the most gruesome death of this world. Trapped within the Herrscher of the Void is the girl, Khaenri'ah, a girl that is honest to a fault, will openly admit to her ignorance and low intelligence, however, will always excel at being practical. This is the pivotal idea within her character. Her friends battle with her in an attempt to pull her from the grip that imprisons her. Maybe you've picked up on the point I'm making here. When the Sustainer appears, we see the same symbol tied to Khaenri'ah. When our protagonist strikes her, the same symbol appears once again. If she is indeed tied to Khaenri'ah, there is a possibility for history with Dainsleif. If miHoYo is going with a similar theme for this character, she could be somebody who is trapped within the Sustainer, a vessel for something more sinister.
Step forth if you have understood the meaning of your journey. Defeat me, command me to step aside. Show me that you are worthier than I to rescue her. Then, the threads of all fate will be yours to reweave.
The prophecy shows destruction and signs that it is by her hands. Defeating her will allow the reweaving of fate to prevent this destruction. But he doesn't say defeat, he says rescue. Command me to step aside and rescue her. He has been trying for a long time, and is asking the protagonist to prove to him that they are worthy to do the job that he has been unable to thus far. So I pose the question, could she be the sustainer of heavenly principles? Finally, to wrap up, this is a prophecy found tied to Dainsleif quoted from a self-proclaimed prophet. I will go through it line by line. The confluence between past and future. This suggests a river or pathway between the past and future. I'm not certain of its meaning, but it may pertain to the abyss, where time flows differently to the outside world. This is established in Child's character story, but I won't dwell on that line any further, as it could just be for flavour. The original calamity has been overturned, yet the island in the sky set the earth to burn. The world has recovered from the original cataclysm, Yet whoever resides on the throne in the sky has set things in motion to lead to the events of another calamity. From this we conclude that the prophet is speaking of events to come, not events that have passed. Chalk pursues gold in this time inopportune. Albedo is known as the Kaide Prince, which in German is the Prince of Chalk. There is so much to say about Albedo that is beyond the scope of this video. In short, I believe there is evidence that points to gold being the nickname for Albedo's master. His motivation to investigate Durin and the sword link directly back to gold. I believe he's already pursuing gold, as it appears he is looking for his master. The eclipse is swallowed by the crimson moon. Events we see in the We Will Be Reunited trailer. More evidence to suggest Lumin is seeing things to come, not experiencing things that were. The future must atone for bygone mistakes, as the bond familiar falters and breaks. Of the same blood, elders and the youth, such is the cycle of the world in truth. This alludes to the collapse of Teyvat, bounds between the nations faltering and the world falling into disarray. Teyvat is known for being a world of war and destruction, and this is what the cycle of the world appears to be. It must atone for its mistakes. Many cycles consist of death and birth, destruction and rebuilding, and it appears Teyvat is no stranger to this concept. I mentioned the flowers maybe being a type of lily. Their appearance bookends the trailer. Maybe they represent the rebirth of the cycle. The trailer start is during or after the cataclysm, when the siblings arrive. The trailer's end being the end of the story, when our protagonists finally reweave fate, starting a new cycle. Or they could just like flowers. Dane, what is that strand of blonde hair to you? Someone you must kill, or the object of your penitence? The hair probably represents somebody who has failed, and a solution to this mistake is to kill that who the hair belongs to. This killing may be optional, it's hard to say. The hair could belong to our damsel in distress, but I don't really think there is any solid reasoning that suggests that these two lines are equatable. It neither strengthens nor debunks the case. I find myself questioning the Sustainer's hair colour. I'd say white, but it has more colour to it than other characters in the game with white hair. So I'm not going to argue the case that she's blonde. Kiana fan may get mad if I do, as in Honkai, her hair is obviously white. I do love it when things come back around. It's as if I laid the seed perfectly and created a bookend for the video. Remember I mentioned Dainsleif sharing his name with a sword that must kill before it can be stowed once again? This shows how his name fits his character perfectly. He cannot rest until his mistake is undone. The sword must take a life before it can, once again, be stowed. I know this video probably lacked a lot of focus, but I hope I did invoke some thoughts and ideas on the possibility that she is someone outside the obvious assumption. As far as I'm concerned, her identity could be either Lumin or the Sustainer, but she may well be somebody we haven't even been introduced to yet. Not knowing is all part of the fun.